I hope you can see it. So there we are. So good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the third session of the first day of the first online Inspire conference. My name is Yuri Robrecht, and I work in DG Environment on the implementation of the Inspire Directive. I'm happy to guide you through an interesting program today, the next hour and a half at least, with some committing speakers from all over Europe. But before we start, I would like to ask you once again, you saw the slide that we put on again. I would like to ask you to mute your micros if you're not already muted, and only use video if you are presenting. So that's to avoid any noise pollution and to have a fluent session and not too much technical hiccups. You have the option, we will use the Slido tool as an interactivity tool. Some of you already have a lot of experience with Slido, some might be newbies, but if you navigate to the www.slido, then you will be able to enter a code that is Inspire 2020. You see the URL of Slido in the left corner of the slide. If you go there, you can enter the code and you will be able to answer questions and participate in polls. You can also ask questions by using Slido. You can also ask questions by using the chat window of WebEx. If we have time, then we will try to come back to your questions. At least the first level of interactivity will be through Slido. Most of the sessions will use Slido. So that's it. So don't forget, turn off your video if you're not speaking, and mute your mic to avoid noise pollution. And don't forget, every time we will ask Slido questions, we will put up the URL and the code you have to enter to go there. So, and you can also raise hands. I saw that Roberto has already raised a hand. I don't know what. Roberto, you can ask your question in the chat window. So let me go on first. We will also record the meeting. Danielle has just started the recording so that they can watch it again afterwards. So welcome to the session, Building the European Green Dataspace. We have a nice turnout for this session. As far as I know, Karen informed me that more than 150 people have registered for the session. So to get most out of it, for the last time, a reminder to mute your micros and not use video unless you're speaking. As I said, a very nice program, a very interesting program with a lot of committing speakers from all over Europe. From Luxembourg, we welcome Iri Pilar. Let me move ahead with the slides. Next. From Luxembourg, we welcome Yuri Pilar from DG Connect and Hannes Reuter from Eurostat. From Spain, we have Gabriel Anzaldo Varas. From sunny Belgium, we have Mohamed El Aidam from DG Agri and Glenn van Kouwenbergen from the University of Leuven. And finally, from Denmark, we have Stefan Jensen from the European Environment Agency. Oh, that was pretty fast. Let me take my slides back. There we are. And that's where we are. So also for your information, I put again the program on. So the session will focus on the initiative of developing a common European data space to boost the data economy and improve the evidence for policy development and support for the digital and green transitions. Now, the major focus besides the first presentation from Jirgi, that will focus on the European common data space from mostly a economic perspective, but the main focus of our session here will be on public data for the Green Deal data space. So Jirgi will tell us about the EU data strategy, the data spaces and the high value data sets. And I will try to complement it with some slides on the Green Deal data space and on Inspire as an instrument to address the government-to-government data sharing. Gabriel from Eurocat will then follow up with the use case of water, presenting the results from ICT for water, and will show us how digital and Inspire can support the development of a digital single market for water services. And then we start with the spatial data for the data space block. And in this one, Glenn van Kouwenbergen will kick this off with the results, the outcome of a study they did on the value of public SDIs for the digital transformation. And this will be followed by several thematic presentations from Mohammed on Ajax, on Agri Ajax and LPIS data. So that's land use, land coverage. And Hannes on the core reference data. And then by Stefan on the data sets for e-reporting. So without further ado, I will now give the floor to Jirgi to kick off the first presentation. I think Daniele can give Jirgi the presenter role so he can share his presentation. I wish you all a good session and a good presentation. Enjoy.
Thank you, Yuri. I'm trying to share my screen. Did it work?
It looks great.
And from that, I also infer that you can hear me. That's even better.
Perfect sound, Jirgi.
So it is my pleasure to start this session with the presentation about the framework for the whole system of European data spaces, including the green data space. I work in the part of the European Commission that is located in Luxembourg and that prepares the European strategy for data and overall the policies related to data in Europe. We happen to have a new commissioner since about half a year, and it was very clear since the beginning that Mr. Breton, the commissioner for the internal market, will want to come up very early in his mandate, will want to come up with a strategy, and not only for artificial intelligence, as you can see from this quote, but also for data. And this is what the Commission did. We prepared it and published it in February this year, still during the normal times, but the fact that the times are less normal has not stopped us from working on the strategy and putting it into place. First, a couple of figures on where we stand today, which show that the things not only are moving very fast ahead, but also that they will not move in the same direction as they have been moving so far. There's a trend now that appears according to which the data is not only increasing in volume, but it also is moving in the ecosystem from the cloud, where it is storage today in its major part, closer to where things are happening, closer to the edge. So when we look at the data landscape today and we see that there's a relatively low number of players, big tech companies that are controlling most of valuable data around us, the situation doesn't need to remain forever like that, and Europe still has a lot to play for, and Europe still can capitalize on its strengths and come stronger from this new trend towards edge computing. And we don't need to remind here that data can address a lot of challenges that are waiting for us. Some of them we weren't very strongly aware of when we were drafting the strategy, but they turned out to be quite present over the last couple of months, and we see that data is also part of the solution for the COVID crisis. So the strategy for data would like to see a couple of objectives and things happening. Firstly, there should be a single market for data. This is something that Europe has been repeating over the years, because we can see that while there has already been a lot done to build a European single market for the more tangible and traditional commodities and services and capital and work, for data, there seem to be sometimes new barriers emerging, and this should not happen. The data should be also something that flows across the EU, and not only across the national borders, but also across sectors. There should be enough data for various purposes that you can imagine in Europe. Some of it can come from the private sector, some of it from the public sector, and it should be available as easily as possible to realize its potential. At the same time, European rules and values are not exactly the same as the rest of the world could share. So it is important that our European values get the protection that they deserve. Here we can speak about protection of private life, of personal data, but also consumer protection, which will always be easier when the European has sovereignty over its data space. And last but not least, the rules for access to data and the reuse of data should be clear, and everyone should know when I have some data, what can I do with the data, and everyone should also know if there is the data I need, I know what I need to do in order to get that, if it's possible to get the data. The strategy also identified a couple of problems that are still here and that will need to be tackled in order to get to the objectives that I have just enumerated. One of them is clear lack of data processing and storage solutions that would be really of European provenience, that would be in European hands. So this is one of the important things that the strategy would like to address. We also noticed that in some sectors, the approaches to data governance are either totally missing, so you cannot get to some data, or you don't know what are your rights when you possess some data or need some data. At least in some member states. In some member states, these things are getting already addressed, but the situation is not very well harmonized, and this can lead to barriers inside the internal market. Another problem can be simply availability of data. Some data is out there, but difficult to be reused for various reasons, or because there is nobody who could decide who can get access to data and what can be done with the data. Sometimes companies also are quite reluctant to let anybody else get access to their data, even for remuneration. In terms of user empowerment, we already have since a couple of years the possibility to port our data from one service to another, from one service provider to another. But even though this provision is clearly available to us, it has not yet been very much used, either because people simply don't know much about it, or because there's not enough choice, or because there's not enough technical solutions that would allow us to do this. And all these problems lead, of course, to a fragmentation of the single market, because the extent of such problems is different in different member states, and it would be worth tackling them together across the EU. That's why the strategy came with 4 pillars that will address these problems. Firstly, and this is something on which we have been already working over the last couple of months, is preparing a legislative framework that would make it clearer what are the governance rules in Europe in terms of data, both private sector data, but also data that is generated and held by the public sector. Secondly, we are working on technological enablers that could be provided thanks to investment, namely through a Digital Europe program. One of the most impactful is the high impact project that would include federated cloud infrastructures, edge computing, supercomputing, and the investment would be quite consequential to make sure that it makes a difference in the European data landscape. The third strand of activities will look at competencies, not only skills of data professionals who work with data on a daily basis, but also skills and data knowledge of all of us, to make sure that we can take good care of our data rights, and that we can take advantage of what the data economy has offered us. And last but not least, the strategy mentions a number of common European data spaces. We will get to them very soon. That would help to put all these rules and technology and data together. Here you can see that the strategy already mentioned 9 of them. Green data space or Green Deal data space is among them, quite logically. And all these data spaces will benefit from a good availability of data, both from the public and from the private sector. The idea is that the data will move freely across the national borders, but why not also across the data spaces? There will be clear governance rules. Some of them will be common. For example, GDPR is a good example for a common governance framework that will have to apply to personal data regardless of which data space we are talking about. But most data spaces will also require very specific rules because they will have very specific kind of data. You can imagine that different rules will apply to IoT data from the industry and manufacturing, and different rules will apply to data, for example, from the health sector or from finance. Of course, very important role will remain for contracts, for agreements between parties that will be still very much free to decide what they want to do with their data. There will be a lot of stress on standards and interoperability, and this will be also one of the strong focuses of the future work of the Commission to make sure that the data spaces work on standards that are the most needed, and then they can make the biggest contribution to interoperability. Here we can also mention personal data spaces that can go across a number of sectoral data spaces, and they can make it easier for citizens to govern their own data, the data that they have generated in course of our daily life. We also mentioned high-value data sets from the public sector that could very strongly contribute to all of these sectoral data spaces. What are these high-value data sets? I think it's a term that the Commission has been talking about quite often over the last year. So let's have a quick look at what those are. They come from the Open Data Directive. It's a directive that has been around since 15 years, but it was revised last year, and the new name of the directive is shortly Open Data Directive. And the principle that it puts in place is that if I can go and ask and get the data from a public sector body, then I can also reuse such data for something else, for any commercial or non-commercial purpose. There should be licenses for the reuse of data that are not too restrictive. There should be ideally no or very low charges. So that would be the main rules of the Open Data Directive, but the new Open Data Directive also introduced a category of high-value data sets, which would be the real open data. The open data really easy to reuse for free, reusable by machines and accessible via APIs, and if possible also as a bulk, so that you do not need to download one entry after another from a big database. And of course, the legislator could not know what those high-value data sets should be. The legislator, I mean the European Parliament, European Council. So it's only outlined in a rough way in the directive, and we know 6 categories. from which the high-value data set should come. And we know that those high-value data sets should bring a decent economic and societal value that would be higher. The benefits should be higher than the fact and the costs of making them available, well, mainly for free and machine readable, because there will need to be some sacrifice done on the part of the public sector bodies that either generate money from selling such data sets, or they will need to spend some money to bring them into shape, such as machine readability and availability of APIs. So the Commission has been working on identifying these data sets. They will be listed in an implementing act, which will be most probably a regulation, implementing a regulation that should be adopted in the first quarter of the next year. When you look at the categories, you will realize that a lot of these categories will overlap and will have some use for European green data space. I will give you just a little taste of categories that are the most relevant for Inspire and environment. The category that we are looking at, I'm not saying these are the data sets that will appear on the list, but these are the ones that we are examining more closely, and currently with the help of our study contractors, we are running a proper cost-benefit analysis for making such data sets available as high-value data sets. So this would be the examples from the geospatial category, and this would be the examples from the environmental data category. We have to say that these categories are the easier ones, probably because there has been a lot of work done already in harmonizing them, in putting in place standards that govern this data, in also disseminating this data, because a lot of it already has European level rules on collecting and disseminating such data sets. So here our job is mainly to look at how these data sets could contribute to some economical and societal benefits. And the fact of being on the list of high-value data sets or not being on the list of high-value data sets does not speak about relevance of these data sets for some other purposes about which the colleagues will speak further during this session. And now I would like to mention a couple of supporting activities that the Commission is making available for easier availability of public sector data and high-value data sets in particular. Firstly, there is the European data portal that federates the national data portals, that harvests their data sets and makes them available all from one point. There is also the EU open data portal that disseminates data from European institutions and bodies. I should also mention quite a fresh piece of news, and it's the EU recovery plan, which was published last week, and which puts clearly the green issues and digital issues together as part of the strategy that should get the European economy going and getting to a higher standard after the tough times that we are going through and that we will still be going through in the coming months. So green and digital are clearly going together, so there will be also a lot of funds available to fund ideas from these two domains. Digital Europe program is a more concrete example of funding that the European Commission is making available very soon. So far, the sums are not clear yet, but it's very clear that there will be funding for a lot of activities related to data, artificial intelligence. There is also a smaller programming or funding program under the Connecting Europe facility. We launch it every year. It will not be different this year. It will open at the end of this month, and it will fund projects that use public sector data, sometimes combined with private sector data or with crowdsourced data, and these projects should try to come up with solutions to some interesting problems. So I would like to finish with a quick overview what a Green Deal data space should look like. It should bring together players from any sector, public, private, NGOs. It should use data from the public sector, private sector, from citizens as well. Funding will be available to finance necessary tools or infrastructure that will be needed to put the data space together. And last but not least, there is also Destination Earth program that will be a very good example of concrete use of data space built around observation, Earth observation, and geodata. I think on this space I will leave the floor to Jyri, who will give you some more concrete information on the green data space.
Okay, thanks a lot, Jyri, for lifting at least a big part of the VLOM, the European Common Data Space, in this very comprehensive presentation. And if you allow me, I will now try to complement your narrative with some reflections on the Green Deal data space. We already had some questions from the audience in the chat box on this one, and the link with the INSPIRE directive. I will try to share my screen again. Okay. And after my, it's a very small presentation. After my presentation, I think we come back because both Jyri and myself have asked a question in Slido, and we will ask the Slido questions after this, after my presentation. So there we go. Oh, let's start in the beginning. That's the beginning. That's it. Okay. Okay. So when looking at both the European Green Deal communication, and don't forget, if you don't know about or don't know about the Green Deal at all, then the main Green Deal objective is to become climate neutral by 2050. It's our new sustainable growth strategy for the European Union. When you compare the European Green Deal communication and the European Strategy for Data, which was published in February together with the Digital Strategy and the Artificial Intelligence White Paper, it is clear that data is at the heart of the Green Deal, and the digital transition is considered as a very important enabler to implement the Green Deal objectives, including better implementation of existing legislation. The Green Deal even refers to the development, as already mentioned by Jyri just a moment ago, it refers to the development of a very high precision digital model of the Earth. And that is what you call the digital twin of the Earth. And we will come back to this in a lot more detail tomorrow in a session tomorrow afternoon, specific on twinning the Earth with examples from the European level, the national level UK, and the local level Belgium, Antwerp. And that together will be put in a context that will be presented by Metabolic. So that would be a nice session as well, just as a reminder, tomorrow afternoon, good session on this Destination Earth digital twin. So, and if you want to do such a digital twin or this Destination Earth thing, then it's clear that you need a lot of data. And it's data coming from sensors, the Internet of Things, it's data coming from smart devices, phone, cars. In the EU strategy for data, these Green Deal ambitions are being supported by the development of the European Green Deal data space, with special attention for several initiatives, amongst which are the Green Data for All and the Destination Earth, which is a digital twin. And furthermore, in the data strategy, we also have 2 pilots on zero pollution and on circular economy that are foreseen as priority actions to develop the Green Deal data space. Now, when you look at the picture of the different sectorial data spaces, and Jyri just explained them, and you look at the objectives of the Green Deal, then you quickly realize that the European Green Deal data space alone will not be sufficient to support the implementation of the Green Deal objectives. Even with the European Green Deal data space, we already see sub-data spaces emerging along the strategies that we are developing, because we're developing a biodiversity strategy, we have developed the circular economy action plans, we're working on a chemical strategy, we have an industry strategy, and all these strategies have the tendencies to develop their subspaces. So all these data spaces have to support the free flow of data and have to be connected. A general regulatory guidance under the form of a legal framework on which DG Connect is working right now would be more than welcome to make sure that there is the interoperability is guaranteed and that the data spaces are connected within the main data space, but also across the different sectorial data spaces. If, for example, from Farm to Fork initiative for the food security, you will have to connect the Green Deal and the agriculture data spaces. If you would ever want to assess the impact of certain chemicals released in the environment on the human health, then you will minimally have to connect the health in this health data space with the industry data space, with the Green Deal data space, and so on and so on. So the interoperability is very important here. The focus of the INSPIRE directive, and we look at the high-value data sets for the public sector, which is then the main focus on public sector data. But the focus of the INSPIRE directive and our focus today is on that public data and on privately held public data. The main contributing component, as you said, is the high-value data sets and the implementing act that is being prepared by the Commission for the moment. So now let's have a closer look at one of the initiatives under the Green Deal data space that will complement the high-value data sets. And I'm talking about the Green Data for All initiative. So the European Green Deal emphasized the need for better information and data that are more accessible. So this was followed again afterwards by the European Strategy for Data that announced the Green Data for All initiative that should review in particular the interaction between the INSPIRE Directive 2007/2 and the Public Access to Environmental Information Directive 2003/4. The initiative has the ambition to position the INSPIRE Directive as a data sharing framework in support of the common European Green Deal data space. So in short, the vision for INSPIRE will not change. It's still about promoting data sharing and putting in place transparent, interoperable spatial data services to feed for the applications that can be built on top of it and to improve the overall policy development by having the data accessible. The overall objective of the Green Data for All will be to modernize the INSPIRE Directive and the Public Access to Environmental Information Directive to a more contemporary state of technology. That's the first objective. Second objective is to promote active dissemination and sharing of government and private health public data in support of the environmental key and the Green Deal objectives. And finally, we will also define and implement interoperable building stones for sharing public data in the Green Deal data space and possibly also to be used in other data spaces as well to connect the public data across the different data spaces. Now, let's have a look at the high-value data sets and to make this a bit more concrete. So the high-level categories of high-value data sets as defined in the Open Data Directive, that is geospatial, meteorological, mobility, statistics, Earth observation and environment, companies and company ownership, the green blocks in the right corner on the right top. So these categories, they show a meaningful overlap regarding data scope with the INSPIRE directive. All categories of high-value data sets are in greater or lesser extent covered by INSPIRE data teams. So we need to very closely collaborate with the colleagues of DG Connect to make sure that both the legal frameworks strengthen each other and are complementary. So this need for alignment will surely be covered also by the Green Data for All initiative. So that's in a nutshell the information I wanted to share from an INSPIRE perspective, and I think that we're now ready, and this is the last slide I have, that we're ready to move on to 2 questions. If you have a specific question on the content that was just presented, put it in the chat box, and I propose that we now move to the questions that Yuji and I prepared. And this is, let's hope that technology will function. There we are. So again, you can surf now with your web browser on your smart device, on your smartphone, or on your laptop, or on your computer to slido.com, and you enter the INSPIRE 2020 code, and that will bring you to the first survey that I will now kick off. Well, we have 2 questions. First question is, what is, coming from Gigi, What is the one word describing the most urgent issue to tackle in order to leverage the potential of data for the benefits of the European Green Data Space? So what do you think is the main bottleneck for the better sharing of data or making data available? And we just want to ask you to give us a word or a concept or whatever. And the second question that we have is, well, it's a statement more. It's SPI should be used as a framework for sharing of public spatial data in and across the European common data spaces, or you agree and you have been waiting for it for all your life, or you agree, but then you think it still needs some work, or you agree, but it should be limited to Green Deal data space because the Inspire directive is about environment, or no, we should try something completely different now, or you don't have an opinion. So answers are coming in. And it seems to be a big race. Most of the people, and I think we have a lot of Inspire people in the audience, and they've been waiting for the pickup of Inspire for it to be used across different domains for a long time to get the maximum value out of their implementation efforts. So let me check now the first question. Oh, there we are. There we are. That's it. And then Gigi, maybe you can come in as well. I think interoperability seems to be the key keyword that pops up quite obviously, and then licensing. And I think these are two very important concepts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, indeed. Thank you for these answers. They seem to be quite relevant. Yeah, I can definitely imagine that interoperability will be a major issue when you look at all the possible sources of data from which Green Deal data space will be populated. It will be from private, public sector, from citizens, from researchers. So it will be one of the major things to tackle. I see licensing is quite important. Maybe
it
mainly
seems to
for
be
private sector data.
It seems to be the issue for every major data sharing framework. And it's all about the interoperability, which is not easy to do, but improves the added value and increases the added value tremendously. And then a big issue is, of course, the licensing. And this will something that we will tackle together. Of course, you have the public data and privately held public data, which is one part of it. And for this, we also need the licensing and reuse conditions very clearly. But I think when we start also introducing the personal data or the consent data from citizens, then we are talking about GDPR implementation. If you bring in the private data as well, then licensing becomes more and more important. And I think it's not only just developing the green data space, as you said, but it's a very important part of this data space will be data marketing, where you have a kind of a circle of trust in which people can make their data available for reuse under a certain license by a certain audience or a certain end user. And I think that's something that is that warrants a kind of development of a platform in which Inspire should be integrated in the long term.
Yeah. And I see a lot of stress on harmonization in different spellings. Yeah. And that's another thing that will be absolutely crucial. And I think we can already build a lot of work that has been done around Inspire and by the colleagues working with environmental data sets. So this is something we will definitely continue working.
Perfect. Thanks, Yuji. And then I'll have a last look at the situation with the reuse of the Inspire as a framework. There I got the majority, almost half of it, says it's fully agreed, and I thought you would never suggest it. And then a large group as well following up with agree that it should happen, but we still need the alignment with the other data legislation. I think that's quite essential as well. And then a minority thinks that it should only be used for the Green Deal data space. So I think that's with this happy note and these great outcomes and clear opinions. I think I propose that we wrap up our first presentation and then open up the floor now for Gabriel and Zaldivaras from Eurocat, that is the Technology Center of Catalonia, who will actually enlighten us a bit on how we could actually use Inspire and the common data spaces as instruments for gov-to-gov data sharing and building, and on top building a single market for water services. So Gabriel, I think you will be able, I will stop sharing now, so you can actually take the floor and share your screen with your presentation. Oh, there you are.
I am start sharing my screen. I don't know
Good to
if
see you, Gabriel.
Hello, good afternoon. Do you see my screen now?
It's perfect. Yeah, perfect.
Okay, great. I move this square. Okay, thank you very much for inviting me to this event. Okay. Of course, we are going to present our experience in regards to the things that you have been presented according to Inspire and the application of the Inspire in the particularly in the water sector through the European projects. Okay, because we have been working in this matter since 2012 in a very coordinated way and voluntary way. That's important. And we would like to let you know which is our experience on that, okay? First of all, I would like to review which is the current situation that we are involved on, no? Or ourselves are involved, no? We have great challenges from one side, which can be diversity and equality, but particularly we are very interested in climate change, circular economy, and the linkage with technological revolution. We think that this technological revolution provides us with very powerful technologies that came from the size of digital technologies sometimes, but other areas also, okay? And particularly these technologies are so exponential, no? They provide big changes like artificial intelligence, no? That now is mentioned all over the presentations, no? But we have also a clear set of objectives, no? That we have to accomplish. We have challenges, technologies, and a clear set of objectives because the objectives that we have to try to accomplish are the sustainable development goals, no? Then we have the objectives, but in the middle of all of this situation, we have the data, okay? The data is what fuel us in order to try to satisfy this objective with the technologies in order to complete with the challenges, no? And then for that reason, the importance of data is crucial, no? Let me introduce how we are working on this. No, we are the ICT for Water cluster, which is only a name because we are not a formal organization. We don't have any kind of legal organization, but we are a group of European projects working together in order to improve our outcomes and results. This way of working started in 2012, okay, where we had the first 5 projects that were very aligned with Inspire from the beginning, okay. These were FE7 projects. Then we start to incorporate another type of projects, and we start working in common approaches regarding to data, regarding to digital technologies, and regarding to all the advances that we are producing. We have started producing roadmaps, we have produced so many guidelines, but we also produce what we call an action plan that was delivered in 2018, which is the action plan for a digital single market of water services, okay? This action plan established a very clear set of actions that I will go through at the end of them, okay? But during the last year, we have been working in these actions, improving these actions, trying to put in order all our results in a common reference schema and establish KPIs in order to find more gaps, because we are present all around the world, okay, because we have projects running all around the world. This is updated not with the information of this year, that where we grew a lot during the last 6 months, which is very positive for us. But from the beginning, we had found that the interoperability was in the center of the problem, okay, because we have a big concern on this regard, because there is a landscape of standard which is huge from several points of view, by the data itself, the architectural, the domain. There is many standards, as they were growing, the complexity, the generation, implementation, and understanding make something that it's difficult to be implemented. And we detect this from the beginning, not only us, this is a common understanding of all of us, but we focus in this interoperability problem from the beginning of our initiative, okay? And particularly for the water sector, which is where we apply. This existence of too many standards has the typical problems, no? Which are the fragmentation, lack of communication between the different systems, lack of cross-domain application and services, not only inside of water, between different parts of the water cycle, but also outside with another domains. We have several heterogeneity in water digital infrastructures. Inside the same company, there could be different architectures regarding to data, and this was the situation that which is very common, no? And was very common, not in the last years, okay? And this acts in the lack of we need better business models. The business models are not so optimal if we don't have this interoperability deployed. No? Then we focus a lot in smart water management, but pushed by the interoperability in order to facilitate the free flow of non-personal data. Initially, inside of the water cycle, but now we are working outside with other domains. Of course, we have to take care of also of the cybersecurity and security problems that related that we are a concern that we have been tackling in parallel also. Then we have set these milestones where we start to work in 2012 when I say with a lot of organization, because we had almost now 50 projects from the beginning and 20 are actives. If you take an account a media of 15 organization per project, we are connected with the whole water sector for sure, okay? Then we start in the beginning to work in interoperability concerns about data architectures, but aligned with the SPARK principles from the beginning, okay? Then we found there was another initiatives around the world, like OGC standards, where they provide also common data reference models. We have been working in WaterML structure. We have been working in Quasi from the beginning, but we thought that these things has to be aligned in order to facilitate the free flow of information also, okay? Then in 2015, there was a Sandre, which was a model that tried to perform this alignment. We have been collaborating on that, but once we found these definitions, there was a problem for the practical implementation, because when we try to define these kind of things with very specific and detailed schemas, this means that the payloads that we generate were so big and not practical, to be honest, no? Then all the people start to make some kind of specific applications. Then the problem that we tried to tackle was still there, because they are not something practical in order to be effectively deployed in the market, you know. Then our approach was always bottom up. Okay, we try to build recommendations and things from the bottom up perspective always. Then, when we found this problem, we start to work in ontologies. From the beginning, we have worked in ontologies, but now more applied. And currently, we are trying to contribute to in the line of Zares, that I will go through it later, and Copernicus and Inspire and so on. Okay, when we start to work in ontologies, the same problem appears, because we start to work in an ontology particular for the whole domain of water, but again, several people start to work in the same direction, several ontologies appear, okay? Here we have 3 more representatives, okay? At that time, that were the water semantics ontology, water ERP ontology, and a model on top, all the OGC structure, which is high features, but the situation was again the same, no? Because several ontologies in different domains start to appear. This is only a short sample of ontologies. If we take in this particular catalog, we found almost 600 ontologies, and the problem was exactly the same. No, then for us, we was again the same problem, and we tried to solve it from the practical point of view. Meanwhile, we had been working in water ontologies. In the energy domain appears an ontology, which is a smart appliance reference ontology that was built initially for the energy sector, and particular for device assets point of view and devices point of view, where they try to homogenize the way to integrate these entities in the energy point of view. ETSI, which is a standardization body in the European Commission, I think that oriented by the European Commission, also take charge of this. And in the framework of ETSI, this SAREF ontology, which is on top of the other ontologies also, and particularly dedicated to particular device, start to be developed for other domains. It was deployments in health, in transport, in agricultural, environment, and so on. Then, because we collaborate a lot with DC Connect and EASME and all DCs that are involved in these matters, we have received this orientation in order to try to align what is the water domain regarding to ontologies, in order to try to build an extension on this. And we have started to collaborating with the task group was created in ETSI in order to try to develop, which is already developed, but because this was the work for the last year, in order to try to homogenize the way that we are going to handle this information at device level. We can say at Internet of Things level, okay? But it's more than Internet of Things, really, okay? But we can use this example in order to try to make the things more compatible and try to contribute to the interoperability in practical way, you know, in order to be practical, okay? Once we have start to solve this problem, the other problem is the architectural problem, okay? Because there is a lot of architectures, open architectures, vendor locking applications, architectures, and so on. Then this year, okay, at the end of last year and this year, we think that once we have decided in order to try to align the water domain with the other domains in order to try to build this ontology, interoperability and harmonization, we start to work in the size of the architectures, okay? Not going inside the architecture, because every architecture has its particular characteristics, by building open interfaces or APIs that could act as parsers between different architectures, transforming protocols and languages. And this work was performed also in the framework of the ETSI standardization body, and results in the publication of which is called the NGSE, Next Generation Standard Interface, okay, which is based in a parser which transforms all the data, all the protocols in a format which is JSON LD, which is very common format that every of us that works in implementations knows this kind of interfaces and APIs. And then we try to facilitate the way of free flow of information in an effective and practical way, okay? I would like to remember that this is what's done in the framework of European project, working together, trying to build interoperability among all of them, and in a collaborative way, trying to join deliverables and so on in order to make the practical implementation more easy and more feasible, okay? In this, parallel to this, we have been contributing, okay? We have been contributing with our data produced in all these projects to Inspire, okay? We have been aligned with Inspire model for the beginning, and every of these ontologies that have been being implemented and interfaces and so on has the inspire behind them, okay, because we try to be consistent on that. In the beginning, we decide, well, we don't decide, okay? It's decided, okay? Then in the beginning, we try to align with Inspire, and now we are also trying to make the interrelation with Copernicus also open access hub, okay? In order to try to contribute with our data, produce it in our projects, okay, which are projects, European projects, to these two common data spaces. We are saying common data spaces behind the, I don't know if they really are now, but at least data portals, okay? Then we have been contributing in this line in a very consistent way, okay? Then our recommendations in the regards are homogenized. We have to work in open standards and common vocabularies. I think that this is very important. This is in the line of ontologies, okay? We had to share, we had to have the principle of share, and not only share inside of the water cycle, but also with other domains. This is very important. I think that we all agree on this. It's important to be practical, to try to deploy these kind of things in use cases. We have the opportunity because we have the projects, and the projects also all include use cases. And we have to move from open standards also to more to linked data, no? When we are talking on NCSLI LD, this open connector or open interface is based in the linked data principles, okay? As I told you before in the beginning, we had built in the framework of the ICT for Water cluster an action plan. This action plan is an action plan for a digital single market of water service. It has an European Commission document, okay, and it was aligned by the European Commission and the ASME agency, and it covers a framework from 2008 and 2030. I think that for the digital water point of view, this is a huge period because the digital technology advanced very fast, okay? But we had established very detailed steps and tasks and actions that we have to perform in order to progress in the practical point of view in what we call a common schema, because we have defined it also, which is the circle on the right, a common schema where in this common schema we establish the way to refer to the water cycles, water value chains, management areas, water resources, water body, water uses, water types, in order to try to align. Take in mind that we are 50 projects, okay? In 50 projects there is a lot of organizations. Then we have to try to have a common agreement in order to represent our knowledge in this common schema. And this was done the last year and was very, very useful for us in order to map all the actions that we are carry out in this common schema all together, no? The actions are grouped in interoperability, which is very advanced because this was the thing that put all of us together from the beginning. When we start due to interoperability, okay? Then we also have groups in data sharing, smart water, decision support, particularly cybersecurity, actor awareness, policy, and business models. And we have not a set of action leaders that we call that are in charge of these actions in order to try to progress from the point of view of the whole cluster. Okay, our last action, which started this year, is these 5 projects that you see on the bottom. Okay, they are working together in a task force in order to deploy practically what we have been working in regards to Saref for water and the open connector that we have been working also in the framework of in the collaboration with the ETSI work, okay? And this all this task force implements also compatibility and integration with Spire, okay, and Copernicus, both, okay, from the SHIS point of view also, okay. And we have on top, on background, the architecture of fireware, because we think that we have to align also with the things that are being prompted by the European Commission, okay. Then we have all these projects working specifically in a cross way. The projects have their own objectives, but collaboratively and voluntary, they are working together in the framework of the ICT for Water Cloud cluster in this task force organization in order to improve much more what we call the interoperability across the water sector. I think that we have been a good work because from the practical point of view, all the architectures and interfaces and open interfaces, the digital advance in this regard, the technology digital advance help us a lot, okay? But we can start thinking in the free flow of data. Start thinking, No, not deploy it, but start thinking of this free flow. Then for finish my presentation, I think that we are in a technological convergence area. We think that it's not only a matter of one technology. We think that the solution has to be a mesh of different technology. If we think in digital technologies, we are thinking in artificial intelligence, of course, which is on top, but also Internet of Things, okay, which collect this data in order to be exploited by the artificial intelligence. Blockchain or other technology which is regarded, which is in the line of cybersecurity, also hyperconnectivity. I think that the solutions, these conversions, can help us a lot. And the data spaces and the data is in the center of all of that. Then we really, from the water perspective, we think that we really need a data space for water, okay, specifically for water, okay. I think that it's really needed, okay, because it's the way that we can not only permit the free flow of data, but also behind the data is the knowledge, and this is the important thing also, okay. Facilitate the free flow of data, but the free flow of knowledge at the same time. Okay. That's all. Thank you very much. Again, thank you very much for let us to share this presentation with all of you.
Okay, thank you very much, Gabriele. I think you had some questions, and I will come back to them. I first want to thank you to show us the kind of complexity of our data ecosystem for the water industry could look like. It gives an idea of the overall complexity of bringing all these components and all the different data ecosystems together in a common data space. And then it's very important, again, as you correctly mentioned, that the reusable and interoperable components are of the greatest importance in the architecture. And that's something that we have to look up when developing also the green data space. And it will be one of the main challenges to bring all these small data ecosystems together in a big one and make it interoperable. I think you had several questions. I will go now very fast through them. I will pop them up again because we have to be a bit stricter on time management. I'm not good on time management. In my heart, I'm an African, and I have little notice of time. So we're a bit going over time for the moment already. So Gabriele had put up 4 questions, and more people are already joining us on the Slido. So I would ask you to go to Slido again and select the question that you would ask him, or 2 questions. We will do 1 question because it's very limited. So at 4 o'clock we have another session, and we should be able to finish at 3:40 at the latest. I will vote myself as well. I just was going to select the AI question. So I propose continue. It's even. So Gabriel, I'm gonna decide now. Oh, there we are. So I guess that we go with the first questions. There we turn over again. So let me ask you the question: what are the main challenges or drivers to implement artificial intelligence-enabled solutions in water value chains? think that's a very good question, and it's very, very pertinent at the moment.
Okay, they are in the there is different challenges in order to implement AI-enabled solutions. Okay, we know that artificial intelligence is among us since a lot of time ago. Okay, but in fact, I think that we have big challenges in regards to artificial intelligence. They are being deployed. Okay, but we have one challenge is in the line of the talent, the talent that you need in order to deploy effectively this kind of solutions. Okay, we need high qualified people. Okay, there is not a lot of people that understand the artificial intelligence field, but combine it with the domain field. Okay, I think that it's important to understand both things in order to deploy effectively the artificial intelligence solution. Okay, and I think that we have to think in artificial intelligence not to solve a particular problem and more in a systemic point of view. No, try to think in the whole process and not to think in provide a recommendation particular for a particular problem. Okay, I think that we have to move to predictive management. This is the big challenge in artificial intelligence. We have to try to anticipate decisions and simulate, if possible, these decisions. Okay, and for that, we have to support the knowledge. Okay, the growth of knowledge of the people. I think that it's very important. We have to be clear only when you go to the market size, the return of investment of artificial intelligence has to be clearly established. Okay, we see all the reports from consultancy companies. They say that the artificial intelligence is going to improve a lot the market, but when you go to the bottom line, okay, it's difficult to explain how we are recovering their investment. Okay, and I think that this is another thing that has to be important also to take in account. We have to provide confident recommendations. This is another thing. This is another challenge. Okay, because in artificial intelligence, from the predicted side, we have a probability of being right in our predictions, and this has to be improved. Okay, but I think that in the other side there is a lot of my things, no, because I think that I am working in artificial intelligence since a lot of years in water, and the rise of opportunity that has appeared during the last 2 or 3 years was impressive. Okay, there is not. We don't need to convince the people to implement these kind of solutions. We have to provide them the right benefits that they are going to reach, but they know that they have to go in this direction, no? And this is important.
Gabriel, thank you very, very much. Let's stop on this note. I think it's very good if you can start in convincing people about the added value, and we have the knowledge. And I think you can be a very, very valuable contributor, at least also to the development of Destination Earth, where we will have policy use cases. We will discuss tomorrow, so you're invited to join us as well tomorrow afternoon for that session on digital twinning and Destination Earth. So thanks a lot again, Gabriele. And I would give the floor now to Glenn van Kouwenberger, who will explain or just give us the outcome, show us the outcome and present us the outcome of a study he did last year together with Deloitte and the European Commission with the GRC on the role of spatial data infrastructures in the digital transformation of the public administration. So Glenn, the floor is yours. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Yuri, for the introduction. Can you hear me?
Perfectly.
Okay, then I will continue to make sure that we can finish on time. So thanks already for introducing the study and the fact that we did this work together with some of my colleagues at the University of Leuven, but also some experts from Deloitte Belgium. Just very briefly, what was the study about? So you already introduced that it's a quite old study. We finished it in July last year. You will also notice that we do not talk, or we didn't address the issue of data spaces, but I think the study we did is still relevant for that topic, in the sense that you could ask to what extent those spatial data infrastructures contribute to the creation of these data spaces. But at the same time, you can also ask about what is now the link between these data spaces and the digital transformation of public administration. Do we consider data spaces as a mechanism, as an enabler of this kind of transformation, or is it rather transformation, some kind of requirement you need to put in place those kind of data spaces? So there clearly is a link. I will not go too deep into that, but I still think the work we did last year is quite relevant. What we did was, in fact, that we had a look at the implementation of SDIs, but also INSPIRE in the 28 EU countries, but also Norway. But we didn't focus on the SDIs INSPIRE itself, but we rather looked at to what extent is there a link with ongoing developments on the digital transformation of government, and to what extent SDI contribute or enable that kind of transformation. We looked at three elements in particular. So the institutional infrastructure was something we aimed to explore. Also the technical infrastructure beyond SDI INSPIRE, we investigated. An interesting part of our work looked at the actual usage of the SDI and its services data, and to what extent it helped realizing benefits to different target groups. And then a final part of our work was to look at to what extent the OECD recommendation on digital government, I think one of the digital government strategies, one of the key documents on digital transformation, to what extent is that recommendation also applicable to INSPIRE implementation? So we rather use that as a way to look back at the study and the results we have. To what extent do they say something on the contribution of SDI to the digital transformation of government? I think most important about the methodology is the fact that we strongly relied on existing data sources, existing literature. INSPIRE reporting, you're all familiar with, was an important source of our information, but we also looked at similar initiatives in the domain of e-government, similar initiatives in the domain of open data. So reports provided by public servants or other experts telling how countries are doing with regard to the implementation of INSPIRE, e-government, open data, etc. And we use that as the starting point for our analytical framework. And in addition to the desk research, which was in fact the biggest part of our research, we did a few phone interviews with experts from 4 particular countries. So we provided us some more information on actions, initiatives, developments, components in their countries. Let me immediately go to the results and then focus on the 3 main pillars of our studies. First, with regard to the institutional setting or the institutional framework, we had a look at the governance, we had a look at active or development of relevant strategies, policy documents, and we had a look at the relevant legal frameworks. And for each of them, we were able to identify a series of development trends in several European countries that indicated a stronger link between SDI on one hand and the digital government transformation on the other hand. So we saw that several countries were putting into place decision-making structures in which not only spatial data SDI are addressed, but where they also really look at the focus or the link between how can these SDIs contribute to digital government and even the government transformation. We also see that the geospatial domain had an increased involvement of non-government actors in the entire decision-making process. I think that's a strong involvement. If we look at the SDIs in the first years, I think more and more countries are looking at how can we involve non-government actors. We saw similar initiatives with regard to the strategies. With regard to capacity building, I think there we were not able to find a lot of relevant practices. So we saw that many countries put in place capacity building actions, but many of them still focus on the SDI implementation. And I think this is linked to one of the pillars introduced in the first presentation. So digital skills is a very relevant aspect. I think here the question is how can we also organize some capacity building, not on SDI implementation, but on increasing the relevance of SDI for the digital transformation of government. With regard to the legal frameworks, I think here it's relevant to see that countries are more and more integrating their work on open data, open government policies within their activities on SDI. relevant development. Then if we look at the technical infrastructure, we identified again 3 main domains where we were again able to identify a series of relevant trends developments. So not only implementing Inspire services, but also additional services beyond Inspire. Several types of user-centric approaches. So we have some examples. Platforms are mentioned several times, the use of APIs, but also the focus on not putting into place as much as possible services, but really focusing on the smaller number of high quality services that are really useful for particular user groups. Like I said before, I talked about the link between open data, SDI on the legal aspect, but you also see the same with regard to the technical infrastructure, not only the catalogs, but also the metadata. And then several initiatives we were able to identify, not only focusing on the interoperability of different types of geospatial data, but really looking at how can we increase the interoperability of geospatial data on one hand, and then administrative data on the other hand. I think innovation, one thing I would highlight there is that what we are doing right now, so the Inspire conference, even if it's a digital one, I think several of the people we spoke to, they identified that kind of conferences as a really enabler or an important element in their innovation strategy. So that was for them a key opportunity to talk to colleagues, but also to look at what are now new and relevant initiatives in other countries. I think that's important to highlight here. And the final part is about the usage and benefits. I think this was the part where we were not, should I say it, where it was most difficult to really find good examples, a lot of information. Although for me, this is really probably the most interesting. So digital government transformation, what I would like to know more about is, what are now really products, what are now services, what are now processes in which we actually see strong transformations. So things governments are doing or providing in a completely different way. So we noticed, based on not only the desk research, but also our talks with different people, that it's still quite difficult for them to really better understand and provide insight into the actual usage of their SDI, but also what are now the benefits that has been achieved. And I think this, we also were able to show that this especially applies to cross-border use cases. Now, like I said, in the final part of our study, we also looked at to what extent is the OECD recommendation on digital government strategies, to what extent this is also, these principles provided by the recommendations have been put into place in the context of national SDIs and Inspire. And this is in fact the results of our analysis, and it shows that many of these principles the OECD considered as very relevant if you want to realize digital government transformation. Many of these principles are also quite central and have been put into place by national SDIs and Inspire at the European level. Again, I think this is still open for discussion, but I think in our study, we were able to provide evidence for the application of many or most of these principles, of which some of them were highly relevant or highly put into place in the context of the SDI. And then this is my final slide. So I think what I would like to highlight is that we would like to, or what we are looking at now is the development of a particular framework that really focuses on the role of SDIs in digital transformation, not too much linked to SDI monitoring reporting as we know it, but rather really focusing on the transformation of products, processes, and services. So that's something that we would like to further investigate. I think based on the information we were able to collect, again, through the desk research and some interviews, we collected evidence that SDIs in Europe and also Inspire already play in several countries or at the European level a key role in the digital transformation of governments. We were able to find different approaches amongst the countries, so many best practices, but we still think that further empirical data showing on this is the real benefits, these are the real impacts of SDI in the context of digital transformation of governments I think we would like to collect more on that. So these are my key takeaways.
Okay, thanks a lot, Glenn, and I will take with me that you catalog by definition public servants as experts, which is great, of course. So thank you, but that certainly, if we want to start increasing the added value and of the SDIs, and I think that is something that in parallel will emerge once public administrations become more digital, or along with the digital transition, and in public administrations start using the data made available a bit more for their own processes. I think then the added value of the SDIs will start to emerge. And then there are some things that we have to take care of, and that's a single access point, the single gateway, for example, by actually bringing together Inspire and open data and other data portals in these data spaces, and provide a single gateway to the data and the data services for the use, and to make sure that they can actually provide the added value. So you also had two questions, and I will show them as well. I will share my screen very briefly, and I would ask Mohammed to get ready already with his presentation. There we are. So Glenn had two questions on the role of the SDI. First question being, on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate the impact of the SDI of Inspire in digital transformation of government? How important is SDI, is Inspire for the digital transformation in your government for the moment? That's a very important one. That comes down to the fact whether the, for example, open data movement and the implementation of the Inspire directive is aligned or not. So, and but that second question, what are, in your opinion, good examples of processes, services, or products demonstrating the role of SDIs in the digital transformation of government? So two very pertinent questions. We have little time, but I will ask you to go to slide.com and still try to provide an answer. First one, environmental e-reporting is an important process that could benefit permit building, yeah, environmental, yeah, and data, yeah. So stop on the report. So let me see. First, in general, so the 39%, 42%. So I think SDIs are still considered very important and a key success factor and a key element to further drive the digital transformation of governments. And then if you look at, I don't know, Glenn, if this is the result that you expected from the kind of services. I think permits for sure, data catalogs, data hubs, data gateways for sure, geoportals, data discovery. But I think there are probably a lot of other services, like we saw from the water industry, the water services. There are also probably the mobility, smart mobility services, energy services that could all benefit from the SDIs and from the data spaces that we are developing. So please continue to answer. I will keep the survey open, but I will ask Mohammed to start sharing his screen, and I will stop sharing mine. So thanks a lot, Brad. And I would now welcome our colleague Mohammed Al-Adam, who will actually tell us about a long environmental dream coming true, mainly the making public available of or the public sharing of agriculture data from the Ajax, the accounting system, and the land parcel information system, the LPIS. So we'll be looking forward to this data becoming available for a long time. Certainly to look at the impact of agriculture on environment and vice versa, and how to move towards sustainable agriculture. So, and finally, Mohammed will tell us how far we are, and when we will be we will be able to access that agriculture data. So, Mohammed, without any further ado, please go ahead. Thank you.
Okay, hello. Good afternoon, everybody. Do you hear me?
Perfect, Mohammed. Perfect.
Okay. My name is Mohammed, as you said, Mohammed Al-Aidam. I'm trying to use this. Okay. How we go to the next slide here. Okay, no. Okay. I don't know what I did, but here I will, as I understood, there is not a lot of time. So here you have a list of some informative slides in the presentation. I will try to do it short. So let's begin. Let's start. I work in Unit D3 in DG Agri, where our main role is to provide implementation support to the member state, and specifically around IACS, which is the Integrated Administration Control System set up by the member state for a sound and good management of the CAP, and especially the CAP subsidies. In 2017, we started the process in collaboration with colleagues, primarily from DG Environment and DG Klima, where our objective is to establish a way to have an efficient access and an effective reuse of the IACS data. This IACS data is the data collected by the payment agencies from the farmers in order to get paid. The method we established, first of all, the legal framework is INSPIRE directive. We also, together with our colleagues from the other EC services, work together with the member states. The reason for that mainly is that the setup of this system is based on the subsidiarity principle, which led to a high diversity of implementation design, sometimes even within the single member state. Also, and it was reminded earlier by one of the speakers, we base our approach on use cases. This also to get the collaboration of the member state, because this process should help them or facilitate their obligation in the perspective of monitoring, evaluation, or reporting obligation exercise. And finally, to avoid any too academic approach, we have pilot implementation actions to be concrete. So just in short, we started the process with 4 member states. And now we have more than 15 on board. Also, additional AC services joined this group, which are DEFIS and Connect. Of course, Eurostat and the European Agency for Environment were already involved in this process. As immediate consequence, we have already more data that can be discovered through the EU Geo portal as regard the IACS data. And finally, as concrete deliverables from our side, we provide the member state with technical guidance. One of them is to help or to have a common understanding of the implementation of INSPIRE, knowing the differences or the problems caused by the local implementation design. And also, this is ensured by a Joint Research Center guidance about the metadata and harmonization, which, if I understood, it's now acknowledged as a key element in this data sharing process and the coming EU Dataspace creation. I will not repeat here. I think there is a consensus between the European Commission official, at least. We work under 2 chapeaux here, which is the Green Deal and the digital. I remind also a kind of ethic commitment from the member state that last year most of them committed to facilitate at least the digital transformation of the agriculture taken in the wide sense, but also and especially regarding the data in the hand of the public administrations. As officer from DG Agri, of course, this data sharing, we are more than convinced. And certainly now with the new cap we have proposed, where there is a shift to performance. That doesn't mean that compliance doesn't exist anymore, but we leave more freedom to the member state to design their agriculture policy. They have to set clear objectives, and for reporting, evaluation, and monitoring duties, there will be a need for data. We remind also the higher ambition environment and climate objectives in agriculture. There is a clear cross-cutting objective focusing on digitalization. And finally, there is a specific article in the new regulation, which has not yet formally adopted, where IACS data sharing is foreseen. What is IACS? Just for people who doesn't know, it's a system, a compulsory system that the member state has to set up, and it is composed by different components. When we speak about IACS data sharing, we speak about two specific components, which are the land parcel identification system and the aid application and payment claims, which in other words said the farm declaration. As you see here, and I think you don't want to read this, we have acts, implementing acts where we indicate, the Commission indicate to the member state which type of data, which type of information should be in the different components. Here it's related more to the data for the land parcel identification system. But here I think it's, in other words, you can translate this list in this design, and where basically the land parcel identification will inform more about the land cover, while the farm declaration provides more information on the land use. The first level, which is LPIS, is recognized or known as more stable data set, or as a reference data set. Of course, it's updated regularly, while the declaration, the GSAA for geospatial aid application, it's a yearly set of data. And as an example here, we have, for the case of Slovenia here, an example of how this system can be built. I will not enter in too much detail here. We have just for when we keep in mind the building of this EU common data space, we have to look at the extreme diversity of implementation from member state to another, and of course this gives even more great importance to the interoperability of the data sets we speak about. The preliminary, the main results here, we know that member states, we are still analyzing this, but member states have already, most of them, experience in data sharing, and specifically IACS data or LPIS data sharing, but it can be very efficient at national or regional level, but definitely not at the EU level. And so with the main bottleneck is this harmonization or interoperability aspect of the datasets. We will now continue, of course, to the process. We will continue to support the member states to have this efficient way of sharing data. For us, so far, it's Inspire framework, but we started also with our colleagues from the different TC services how to move, what are the adaptations, etc., needed to go towards EU Dataspace. So it's concluding remark, but I'm sorry, I didn't really understood the principle of the slide do, so sorry for that. Here, after 2.5 years of exercise and taking into account this challenge, where on one hand we want efficient access and effective reuse of data, on the other hand, the compulsory respect of the legislation regarding the data protection, but sometimes we are going in circles. And to be very pragmatic, I would say here we have a spatial object, which is a piece of land, for which a series of data or information can be found through Ajax, the different components like the area, land cover, land use, but also is this piece of land concerned by Natura 2000 by water frame directive, sorry for the typo. The management, is it organic farming or not, etc. And then you have on the other side the problem of diversity of implementation, the issue of data coming from third source, some strange concept I have discovered along this process, which is the sensitivity of data. And finally, also this concept of indirect identification of a person. So, in other words, I mean, I will switch this one. In other words, the question that has now maybe to be addressed to all the community that has an interest in sharing this type of data. From our perspective, I mean the European Commission here, the components I have spoken about, which are LPIS and GSAA, we propose to share all the spatial and non-personal data. And basically, we will have spatial objects with some information listed there. To each of the object, we will have a certain type of information or data, which is, in other words, the attribute table. And the question still on the table for the moment is, we have heard about sensitivity of data, indirect identification of persons, technical problems due to specific implementation design, etc. Are these more excuses for not sharing data or real legal concerns? So all the challenge for the moment is that we need absolutely in terms of we need the help of all the EC services to clarify these. I mean, from the legal, from the technical, from the IT point of view, to align. Otherwise, we will still face, I mean, justified or not, but still obstacles for data sharing. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mohammed, for presenting your extremely exciting data sharing project. And we are really looking forward of using Inspire to bring the public data from the agriculture and the Green Deal data space together. And this is an excellent project initiative that will demonstrate the added value. I think a lot of people have been looking forward to the disclosure of this kind of data. So I would not, thanks again, Mohammed. I would now give the floor to Hannes Reuter from the DG Eurostat, who will present us the core reference data. And Hannes is pretty quick. There is his screening already. So Hannes, please go ahead. The floor is yours. We have no noise, no audio yet.
Unmute me. That's
yeah, that works. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Hannes. That's
so
lot better now.
Slideshow. So I hope you can see it and can hear me, everybody.
Now it's perfect.
Okay. So thank you for that little hiccup, and let's see that we get some time out. Good afternoon. My name is Hannes Reuter. I'm here on behalf on the DISCO team, or speaking even on behalf of the whole commission, because I'm presenting the geospatial data requirements, which is based on a paper which we have written as a consensus paper across the different European Commission departments. So, and it's a pleasure to present to you here on the online Inspire Conference 2020. Why are we talking about geospatial data and requirements? Because we have been asked by the member states, what are our geospatial data requirements? And for us, it's essential that we have pan-European geospatial data, which are up to date and correct, because we needed to base our statistics or even our evidence-based policymaking on that. And we name it location just as the time is not a factor for collecting all the things. We need to base our analysis. We keep for immigration, for energy, for climate change, for population, or even for the SDGs on that. And without these pan-European geospatial data sets, we cannot do that. And here I just present to you an example from our colleagues from DG Regio, which has measured the access to universities in the European Union, or the access to passenger flights, which already implies that we have kind of this information from utility service of addresses, administrative units, population across available in a pan-European context for our analytical purposes. So having said that one, the objective is to provide you a consolidated and consistent overview with that paper of the Commission needs, set out cross-cutting and domain-specific requirements, and even inform you and seek support from you. And we have done so in different fora, like the Inspire fora, MIC, as well in the DISCO working group, where that comes from, because from the DISCO, we provide for the Commission some of these pan-European data sets besides EEA and other colleagues in the GRC. So if we're looking for this one from a more political point, which are the legal frameworks here? I'm just mentioning a couple, like we had just a presentation from Mohammed on Ajax. We have the statistical, we have Inspire, we have the PSI directive. Going back to the first presentations which we had, something which we have not heard yet is, for example, ITS, development of intelligent transport systems. And we need to bring this all into the play or game to accomplish these kind of pan-European geospatial data sets. From a perspective not only for the European Union, we are also working at the world level. And here is this UNG. We aligned the work with UNGM Europe, which tries to bring together national mapping agencies and statistical institutes to bring together this kind of integration of statistical geospatial data. And these also have developed a kind of core recommendations for core spatial data themes. Here you see a couple of screenshots from their website. For example, we see cadastral parcels, addresses, geographical names, basic services, and we have aligned our recommendation for content with this work also from the UNGM Europe. Having said that one of the things which we have written out here is a geospatial data requirements paper. and they converge together with UNGGM Europe specifications to provide you as a member states a consolidated and consistent overview of the European Commission user needs. This is the thing what we have been asked from you as member states several times, and with that one we have presented you this one. Because sometimes we get the question, oh, why are you doing that one? Yeah, because you asked us to do so, to give you a consistent view, and so here we have done so. Which themes are in view or in scope have been identified. We're starting, like we have heard it already several times, also in the high-value data sets. Starts from buildings, parcels, addresses, administrative units. The statistical units are then based on even the administrative units. We have transport networks, LPIS, so land parcel information system, which then links again to the work which we had heard earlier from Mohammed, even postal codes and utility and governmental service. I just remind you on the first slide I showed you on the analysis from our colleagues from DG Regio. So having said that, having still 4 minutes to go, for the general requirements for our data themes, one of the things we are require across all the different data themes is that we have unique and persistent identifiers, that we cover the full geographic extent of the territory of the state at a scale 1 to 5 to 10,000 even, or sometimes even a little bit higher. The update frequency from a temporal perspective, we should have it once a year or better. For example, we're working for the moment on others data, and we see that depending on the member state, we have between daily updates until 6 months or 1 year data sets. And one of the requirements is, here comes a link to Inspire again, that we have an Inspire mechanism for life cycle attributes and versioning, because at one stage we would like to have received only update only data sets and not the full data set each time. Having said that one, need to go to the next slide. Here a couple of examples which we are currently working on. Lower left you see addresses, lower top railways, buildings from Belgium, addresses, and on the right side you see an example from hospitals which we have sourced from different sources in the national ministries or the responsible organization in the member states. And this was, for example, in response to the COVID-19 crisis, which is currently ongoing, just to show you a couple of examples for pan-European data sets. On the right side, please apologize that there's still a couple of white spots because we have not completed the work and this is ongoing. So just 2 remarks on what issues we observed up to now on this one. Sometimes on the level of metadata, the data set exists, but they are not documented, or data exists locally, but not centrally. And on the issue of if we work with the data and try to ingest them into pan-European data sets, we observe that various scales are delivered or available, or even the data are outdated under Inspire or open data perspective, while the original data are there with much better quality and much more actual. We observe some quite restrictive licenses or access restrictions in certain countries. And also from a technological point of view, we observe that GML and WFS is not performant enough for pan-European data sets. But I mean, this is this message we have given around to you already a couple of times, so there's nothing new on that one. In interest of time, I skip this slide because I want to mention one thing to all of you. How can you contribute? And this is something where you as member states can help us all, because you can enhance your quality beyond Inspire requirements. You can go to UNGGM Europe. You can introduce favorable access and use conditions, even increase reactivity and look into harmonization, which is in the Inspire obligations for some time. But in reality, that's not in place. And last but not least, ensure availability of download services as is, and not hide it behind pay or registration walls. So saying that one, and I promised I will be in 10 minutes. Yuri, I hope you are fine with me, and I get a clap from you on that one. Just joke apart. Conclusion here is our Commission's priority geospatial data needs, thank you, Juri, are coherent with the international geospatial data needs as outlined by the UNGGM Europe. And this is a plea for you, as because you are the member states and you have the data. We need the data for our internal European Commission work first, so we can do pan-European data sets, we can do spatial analysis, and then we will. This will also work for you because later on you will have access to the data if they are freely available. We can make them available. You have analyzers and tools, and with that one, I'm even under 10 minutes. And Juri, thank you, and thank you all for listening. And I hope I had made you a little bit happy. So.
Hannes, you made us very happy for this exciting presentation again, and I guess together with the presentation that Stefan is now preparing, he will share his screen immediately, and on the priority data sets for e-reporting. I think together with them, the core reference data sets that you've been highlighting here should be the core data scope for the implementation of Inspire for the next 2 years. I think if you're able to provide data for the environment, plus the core reference data, and with the overlap with the high-value data sets, we're really pushing a data scope and a public data space towards any kind of service provider that needs or wants to use our public data, whether it be for policy development or for development of digital services for the economy. Well, it doesn't really matter. As long as we make the data available in a pan-European context, I think we can really push this as part of our contribution to the data economy, but even more to the implementation of the Green Deal objectives. So Stefan, I would invite you. So thanks again. Thanks a lot, Hannes. Stefan, I would invite you to share your screen and your presentation. So Stefan Jensen from the Environment Agency will now present the priority datasets for e-reporting. Please go ahead, Stefan. I'm sorry for the short timing and the strictness that we have now because of my bad time management, but it's also exciting and interesting. So I don't dare to stop people. So
yeah, hi, Yuri. Thank you.
Okay, there you are. Audio is perfect and the visual as well, Stefan. Thank you.
It's only me who cannot see the visual in the moment, so let me work on this. I think I will hardly succeed to in this race in the presentations to add another layer of speed. So how much time do I have, Mr. Chairman?
Oh, you have 10 minutes, Stefan.
Oh, do I? Okay. So I cannot see the full screen, but I'll just a sec. Okay, I just get started and you tell me when the slides don't move.
Okay.
So in the moment, just a sec. Can you see the first slide?
Yeah, perfect, Stefan.
Okay, I need to provide, of course I have to rush here. I need to provide a little background, and some of the dear participants, welcome to you all. Some of the dear participants are parts of this process. So what we are doing here with the priority data set, it has to be briefly explained what it is. It's a contribution to the multi-annual implementation work program of Inspire. And since late 2016, we have identified that the scope of Inspire is so broad that we have to focus and shade a light on things which are of special importance. So the Commission, through a process called Fitness Check on Environmental Reporting, had identified data which is very relevant, and we have identified a subset of data which is spatial, and that became the first draft of the so-called list. So this list is being refined as a task of this group, and this purpose is, of course, not only to have a list of data, but also to make data available, and that is the entry point to our discussion on the green data space. And at some point, we also want to work more on interoperability. We learn how important interoperability is. We learn this in this presentation, and we also want to be able to see what are the countries now doing in terms of contributing this data. So a screenshot from yesterday, 2nd of June. That is the situation on so-called priority data sets. These priority data sets, and I should say they are called priority data sets for environmental e-reporting. So they are backed up by the environmental legislation on the European level. Those are data sets countries should provide, and out of a variety of reasons, which I'm not going to list, are not yet providing. And that's not only the INSPIRE legislation, but also a multitude of thematic legislation which is calling for this data. As of yesterday, we can say we have around 850 data sets available, downloadable, usable, and you can look at countries and their different performances. What are these priority data sets? What type of data sets are we having? We have 89 data sets here. Some of them are mandatory due to the reporting obligations. Others are more of a reference type. Others are not really spatial data, but they have more of an attribute character. Third ones are clear reference data sets, which are basically available mainly on the European level. So the data is of different nature, but basically we are identifying and detailing the data sets. Where do they come from? Here you can see a performance of the countries. If you would have time, you could look at this, but now we cannot look at this. You see countries in gray which are not performing well at all. So it is. We see thematic areas on the right side, and the data is coming a lot around the water area from the Water Framework Directive. We heard on water today and the importance of water. From the Floods Directive, air quality is a mature area. Also nature, where we have the Birds Directive, the Habitat Directive, and designated areas. And urban wastewater also in the water area. This forms the majority of the priority data sets which are now being made available. So what are the lessons we have learned? Fortunately, since late 2016, there is a steady growth in how the member states are providing these data sets, but we still have a situation that we have basically a one-third, one-third, one-third split, which means one-third of the countries is working extremely hard and delivering. Another third of the countries is maybe also working very hard, but not delivering so much, but a little bit. And one-third of the countries is certainly not featuring at all, you can almost say. So we would like to see more download services, which means we would like to see more data available, which we then can bring into the green data space. And we see a lot of different approaches, but we are working on getting these approaches more harmonized and so on. There are some technical aspects, maybe not so important for now. We are hoping that with the European data strategy kicking in, we heard about this in the beginning, also the pan-European products, Hannes mentioned them as well, they are going to get more aligned. What is the vision? The priority data set depicted on the right in a blue kind of rectangle. They kind of connected to the core data Hannes was just talking about. And this is data which we shall find in the green data space. We have a lot of other data sets. Mohamed was speaking about agriculture data. We'll find out what is in the agriculture data space, what is in the green data space. We see also the high value data sets. I made a bluish purple circle. This data has some overlap with the priority data sets. It has some overlap with the core data. It is part of the green data space, but it's of course also part of other data spaces. So this all together brings in then data from Copernicus as well. We see citizen science data growing, and we see data from some other domains coming into the green data space. Services will have to be developed, as I mentioned earlier, according to the EU data strategy. Here's my last slide. We're seeing a growing availability of the priority data sets. They will form a building block, a key building block of the green data space. We see future developments in the work program, which we're developing now in the context of INSPIRE, where we aim to support this Green Deal data space for environment and security. And as part of the above, we need to pursue alignment with other pan-European data and service activity. And this was my very, very short version of a presentation. And I have a little bit more on priority data sets next Tuesday, where we will speak in a session about pan-European data sets and how they're being built. Thank you very much.
That was perfect, Stefan.
I also have 2 Slido questions.
Yeah, I know. I'm going to bring them up. I will share my screen and bring them up. So I would like to thank you very much for this very comprehensive and clear presentation. And I think it's clear that we are making a lot of progress on making the priority data sets available, but this is going to be an initiative project task that will be continued in the coming years. Okay, there we are. So Stefan has has made a few questions available. First question, and I ask the audience again to join us on slido.com, inserting the code INSPIRE 2020. First question will be, how do you see priority datasets for environmental e-reporting supporting the Green Dataspace implementation? You can choose one option out of 3. And there we go. And then the second question is, how shall the EU work on these priority datasets be further developed? Up to 3 choices possible. It needs to be intensified. It should be continued, targeting the use cases for the Green Dataspace. It needs to be more integrated with other data provisions, or it's of lesser importance. Also there we see that it needs to be intensified or continued anyway. The people do appreciate the work, and it needs to be more integrated with other data provisions as well. That's something that hopefully the Green Dataspace will take care of. Let me go back to the first question. Maybe give it another few seconds. This work on the priority datasets will of course be continued the coming months, coming years. In the maintenance and implementation expert group for INSPIRE. We'll have another meeting in June where we will discuss the progress, and hopefully by the end of this year, most of the data that is listed as a priority dataset for the environment will be made available in most of the member states. And then we can start thinking about harmonizing the datasets for pan-European use. So Stefan, are you happy with the outcome of the poll so far? Or did you expect something completely different?
No, not completely different. The sample size is still a bit low, but it's getting interesting. Thank you for wrapping this up quickly, these questions.
Yeah, but the tendency is quite clear, I guess.
Yeah.
Already, and then for the first question, so I think overall it's I think there's big appreciation for the kind of data that we are making available or trying to make available, or the member states are trying to make available under the INSPIRE directive for the environment. So that seems to be a strong support for the initiative.
Thank you.
I think this will allow us. We will of course share also the outcome of the question and the poll. I will leave it open for a bit longer now, so that people can still provide answers. So on this note, there we go. And maybe I should show a bit of a video there. Okay, and stop sharing. So on this note, I would really like to close the session. I hope it was an interesting session. You enjoyed it and you learned from it. If you have questions, we will share, of course, all the presentations and the recording afterwards. So you can download and review it. If you have questions, you can always contact people that were presenting. So thank you again. Thanks to all the presenters for the very exciting and very exciting presentations and the good discussions also in the chat. So thank you very much. And a bit of apologies for the lack of time management and running into the other session that will start now at this moment. So thank you very much, and hope to see you soon in a lot of other sessions in this online INSPIRE conference. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.